It's midnight. You're not tired, and through a series of extremely questionable financial decisions, you open Zillow. Not to buy, just to look, just to get a sense of the market. 5 minutes later, you're staring at a house listed for $500,000 and wondering if you accidentally slipped into a parallel universe. The house looks fine. It's not collapsing. The roof is still there. That alone feels like a win. The kitchen has laminate countertops from around 2003, back when people thought flip phones were the future. The carpet is beige, the color specifically invented for people who are afraid of emotions. The basement has faux wood paneling, the kind that says, "At one point we thought this was classy." And then you see the description written with incredible confidence: charming starter home. Starter home. $500,000. Sure, of course. At this point, starter home is just a polite way of saying starter debt. A nice, gentle introduction to 30 years of payments, taxes, insurance, and 2 a.m. wake-ups where you stare at the ceiling wondering what exactly you signed. And the word cozy. That's not a design style. That's just small written in a friendlier font. You scroll through the photos. The wide-angle lens makes the rooms look like they could host a dinner party, even though in real life adding one more couch would require negotiations. And then your brain starts doing math. Not advanced math. Just the basic kind. Wait, with my salary, this doesn't really make sense. And here's the part I need you to hear very clearly. You're not missing a promotion. You didn't somehow skip a secret career upgrade that everyone else got. The thing that's missing here isn't your effort, it's the math. At this point, you might be thinking, maybe I'm just looking in the wrong neighborhood. Everyone thinks that. So you drag the map, left, right, then zoom out, and that's when it hits you. In a lot of places in the US, $500,000 isn't expensive anymore. It's baseline. It's the entry fee. The minimum required just to participate in the game is called owning a normal house. This is the moment you start talking yourself into it. The bank will approve me. People are buying these all the time. I can probably make it work. But there's a weird feeling in your stomach. A small one. A quiet one. The same feeling you get when you're reading a contract and notice something important written in very small print. You can't quite explain it. You just know something's off. If you're house hunting right now, or if you've ever doom-scrolled listings at midnight feeling confused and slightly panicked, you should stick around. Not because I have some magic formula for buying a house, but because this video might save you from turning the next 30 years of your life into a full-time financial stress simulator. Because the biggest problem here isn't just high home prices. The biggest problem is that we're using a very important word incorrectly. A word banks use, agents use. Social media is thrown around constantly. A word everyone thinks they understand, but almost nobody actually does. And that word is affordable. And this is where things start to go sideways in a way that's actually very dangerous while still looking completely reasonable. Right after you say, "Wow, this house is expensive," someone will always step in with a sentence that sounds incredibly reassuring. "It's okay, the bank already approved you." Those two words, approved, have a strange kind of power. They quiet every doubt in your head, like some higher financial authority just looked at your entire life and said, "Yeah, this one's fine." But here's the truth. You and the bank are not answering the same question. The bank is only asking one thing. Can you pay us? That's bank math. The question you need to ask, and almost nobody tells you to ask, is, can I actually live with this decision? That's life math. Those two calculations sound similar, but they're completely different in one crucial way: who takes the hit when things don't go perfectly. There's one line you should remember because it sums up this entire problem. Getting approved isn't the same as being able to breathe. Approval doesn't mean you're okay. It just means the system believes you can handle this loan as long as life cooperates and nothing significant goes wrong. And if you've been alive for more than a few years, you already know that as long as nothing happens is a pretty bold assumption. Banks usually rely on a metric called DTI, debt to income. If your total debt stays under roughly 43% of your income, they'll say yes. But 43% doesn't mean comfortable. 43% means not broken yet. It's the line where the system thinks you can still hold it together, not the level where you actually feel relaxed. At that point, you don't need to be reckless to get into trouble. One unexpected bill, one car repair, or one shaky month of income is enough to make everything feel very tight, very fast. At this point, you might be thinking, but if the bank approved me, they must have run the numbers carefully, right? They did, very carefully. But they calculated their risk, not yours. They care about whether the loan defaults. They don't have a column in their spreadsheet for your sleep. They don't measure the anxiety spike every time you open your banking app. Your quality of life is not part of their model. So let me pause you for a second. Do you know what your monthly take-home pay actually is, not what your offer letter says? Not your pre-tax salary, the real number that hits your account after taxes, insurance, and everything else has already taken its cut, because that's the only number that should be deciding whether something is truly affordable. And so you don't drown in a pile of confusing math. In the next part, I'm going to use a very simple framework. 3 layers of cost. Easy to remember, easy to check. And once you start looking at houses through that lens, you'll understand why so many homes that get approved aren't affordable at all. So instead of letting you drown in a pile of numbers where everyone is talking past each other, I want to give you a very simple framework. Simple enough that once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. It goes like this. There's the payment, then there's the house, then there's your life. 3 layers, clear, no fluff. And they're also the 3 layers most people never look at all at once. The first layer is the one everyone sees. The payment, principal and interest. The monthly number that's bolded, circled, highlighted in emails. This is the number banks, lenders, and listing agents love to talk about because it looks smaller than reality. It's the bait. You only have to pay this much per month. And your brain hears that and relaxes. Okay, I can make that work. The problem is, this layer is just the trailer. The second layer is ownership, the part where you don't just own the house. You own a growing stack of bills that come with it. Property taxes, homeowners insurance, HOA fees if you're lucky or unlucky, utilities, electricity, water, gas, and internet. And here's a very simple truth that almost nobody says out loud: the bigger the house, the bigger the bills. There is no such thing as more space with the same expenses. Every extra square foot wants to be heated, cooled, and lit. And no, none of this was included in the payment number that got you nodding your head. Then there's the third layer, the one most people never factor in when they use the word affordable. I call it life because this is where real life actually happens. Maintenance, roughly 1% of the home's value per year, whether you like it or not. An emergency fund because water heaters love to fail at 11 p.m. on a Sunday. Retirement because ideally you don't plan on working forever. Major repairs, and the thing nobody likes to think about but always exists: a buffer for job loss or unstable income. When you add all 3 layers together, you end up with a very different picture from the original payment number. And this is where I say something a lot of people don't like to hear: the mortgage payment is just the trailer. The total cost is the 30-year movie. And once you've bought a ticket to that movie, you don't get to stand up halfway through and say, "Sorry, I don't like this part." At this point, you might be thinking, this sounds complicated. How am I supposed to calculate all of this? And here's the good news: it's not complicated. You don't need to be a financial expert. You just need to look at the right layer. If you only look at the payment and ignore ownership and life, you're not being optimistic. You're missing information. Agents are very good at keeping you focused on layer 1. They're not lying. They're just not telling the whole story. They talk about how much you pay each month, but not about what your life looks like after those payments start stacking up. And when you only look at the payment, a lot of houses seem affordable. When you look at all 3 layers at the same time, a lot of those houses change shape. So before we talk about who can actually afford these homes, we need to go to the place where most home buying dreams either die early or get pushed forward through risky compromises. Not interest rates, not list prices. The thing that stops people at the door or forces them into dangerous decisions. In the next part, we're talking about the down payment and why it's not just money you need, but the first real stress test of the entire decision. So now you've seen all 3 layers: payment, ownership, life. And at this point, a lot of people start thinking, okay, I just need to save up the down payment. Once I get through the door, everything will be fine. This is usually the exact moment when the home ownership dream runs face first into a wall. Let's start with a number everyone knows but very few people actually feel. 20% of a $500,000 house is how much? $100,000. Not imaginary money, not a spreadsheet number, cash. Real money. Money that has to already be sitting in your account before you're allowed to say, yes, we want this house. $100,000 just to enter the room. You haven't bought anything yet. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, I'll just save 10% of my income every year. Be disciplined. Sounds very reasonable. On paper. In real life, though, there's rent, there are bills, health insurance, car repairs, and those months where life decides to test your emotional durability. Saving 10% of your gross income looks great in a book. How much you can save after taxes and after living is the real story. And this is where I want to give you a metaphor you should remember anytime someone says, just save more. You're not saving for a down payment. You're racing an escalator going the wrong way. You're trying to climb, while home prices keep creeping up, interest rates shift, and time refuses to wait for you. You make progress, but the target keeps moving. That's why so many people feel like they're trying hard and still not getting closer. So most people do the next thing the market quietly nudges them toward. They skip the 20%. They put down 5%, maybe 10%. It's fine, someone says. You bought the house. And yes, technically you did. But you also just unlocked a very special new monthly fee called PMI, Private Mortgage Insurance. I like to think of it as a fee for not being rich enough. You pay extra every month to protect the bank from your risk. It doesn't help you sleep better. It just makes the system feel safer. But here's the part almost nobody talks about, and it matters more than PMI ever will. A down payment isn't just money you spend. It's money you no longer have. If you put $50,000 or $100,000 into a house, that money is no longer sitting in your account. You can't use it if you lose your job. You can't use it for a major repair. You can't use it when life decides to throw a punch. $50,000 to $100,000 isn't just money you paid. It's money you don't have when you need it most. And yes, equity is real. But here's the line. A lot of people learn the hard way. Equity is real, but equity doesn't pay your bills in month 4. Equity doesn't buy time. It doesn't cover groceries. And it's very hard to access when you're panicking. So even if you make it past the down payment hurdle, the story isn't over. In a lot of ways, it's just getting started. Because right after that comes the part that shocks most people. The real monthly cost of living with that house is worse than you think. And that's what we're going to unpack next. So let's say you make it past the down payment hurdle. You've saved the cash, you've signed the papers, you've got the keys in your hand. And sitting in your head is a very familiar number, the one that's been repeated since day one of this process. The monthly payment? Let's say it's $2,850 a month. Not great, but not completely insane either. I can handle that, you tell yourself. And this is the exact moment when reality starts to step into the room. Because that $2,850 is just the payment, principal and interest. Layer 1. To understand what you're actually paying each month to live in that house, you have to add everything else. Property taxes, homeowner's insurance, average maintenance, PMI if you didn't put 20% down, HOA fees if they exist. When you add all of that together, a lot of people have the same reaction. Wait, why doesn't this look like the number I agreed to? Here's the shock number I want you to hear clearly. In a lot of cases, that $2,850 a month very quickly turns into $4,300. Not because anyone lied to you, but because you only looked at the first layer of the cost structure. Taxes add a few hundred. Insurance adds a few hundred more. Maintenance shows up quietly every month. PMI slips in without much fanfare. And suddenly I can make this work turns into I am constantly juggling. At this point, you might be thinking, but my rate is fixed. Shouldn't my payment be fixed too? The interest rate is fixed. The payment isn't always. Because escrow can change. Property taxes can go up after a reassessment. Insurance premiums can jump at renewal. And no one asks for your permission when those numbers move. You just get an email that says, starting next month, your payment is going up by $250. No negotiation, no discussion. Insurance is a perfect example. It doesn't care how carefully you budgeted. It doesn't care how clean your spreadsheet looks. It cares about risk. And when risk goes up because of location, weather, or market conditions, premiums follow. Taxes work the same way. Your home gets reassessed and suddenly you're paying more for the exact same house without an extra room or a single additional square foot. Then there's the HOA. Someone will say it's only a few dozen dollars a month. That's true. Until it isn't. A special assessment shows up. The roof needs work. The roads need repaving. The systems need upgrades. And suddenly you receive a very polite notice that you owe $3,000. No installments, no negotiation, just due. So let me pause you for a second. Really think about this. If your monthly housing cost jumped by $300, what gets cut? Food savings, retirement contributions? Or do you tell yourself it's just this month? This is how a lot of people slide from fine to stressed without ever noticing the exact moment it happened. And this is why focusing only on the initial payment is so dangerous. Because the house doesn't stay still. Its costs are alive. They change. And they don't care how you feel about them. So the real question isn't, how much will the bank lend me? The real question is, who can actually afford this all-in number? In the next part, we're going to flip the equation. We're not starting with the house price down. We're starting from income up. And what that reveals is going to be uncomfortable. So now we're going to do the thing almost nobody does before they sign the paperwork. We're going to reverse engineer the math. We're not starting with the house price and bending your entire life around it. We're starting with your income and asking one very simple question. Can you still breathe? In personal finance, there's an old guideline that's still incredibly useful if you want to live comfortably, not lavishly. Just without feeling stressed every single month, you shouldn't spend more than about 28% of your income on housing. Banks are way more generous. They'll often approve you with total debt up to 43% of your income. And here's the key point. 28% is you can live. 43% is you're not broken yet. Those are not the same thing, even though the system loves to pretend they are. Now here's another truth, and this is where a lot of people get fooled. Gross sounds impressive. The net is real life. Your pre-tax income looks great on paper. But you don't pay your mortgage with that number. You pay it with what actually hits your bank account after taxes, health insurance, and retirement contributions have already taken their cut. That's the only number that gets to be part of this conversation. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, but people are still buying houses. Like, clearly somebody can afford this. True, people are buying. And when you zoom in, most of them fall into one of three buckets. Bucket 1 high, dual income households, 2 strong, stable paychecks. Bucket 2 family money, help from parents, gifts, inheritance, some kind of boost most people don't get. Bucket 3, the biggest bucket, and the one nobody talks about openly, people living on a tightrope. They look fine on the outside, but one small disruption makes everything wobble. And here's a line you should remember because it explains a lot. They get paid on closing day. You pay for 30 years. The seller, the agent, the lender, once the deal closes, their role is basically done. Your role is just beginning. Every month, for 3 decades, with whatever life decides to throw at you during that time. That's why reverse engineering income matters so much. It forces you to face the question nobody wants to ask. If I choose this house, what does the rest of my life look like? Not the first month, not the first year. The middle years when the excitement wears off and the bills keep showing up right on schedule. In the next part, I'm going to show you what living on a tightrope actually looks like. Not in theory, in real numbers. 2 households, realistic budgets, and a few very familiar punches. And once you watch it play out step by step, you'll understand why so many people technically own a home and still never feel safe. Okay, now let's do the thing almost nobody does before buying a house. Run a simulation. Not a clean, optimistic spreadsheet simulation. A real-life one. Month by month, with the kinds of things that happen whether you like them or not. I call this the house poor simulator. No graphics, just numbers and feelings. Case A. A household earning $160,000 a year. Sounds solid. Upper middle class, 2 working adults, health insurance, a reasonable 401k. After taxes, FICA, and benefits, they're taking home about $9,500 a month. Now subtract the all-in housing cost we talked about earlier, roughly $4,300 to $4,400. That leaves about $5,100 for everything else. Now we add real life. 2 cars to get to work, $800. Auto insurance, $250. Gas, $300. Student loans because those degrees helped get this income, $600. Groceries for a family trying to eat normally, $800. Utilities for a bigger house, $450. You're down to roughly $1,900. And we haven't touched clothes, entertainment, gifts, kids, or serious savings. On paper, they're fine. In reality, they're balancing. Case B, income of $110,000 to $120,000. Not poor, not reckless. Same house. After taxes, take home is around $6,800 to $7,200. Subtract $4,300 for housing. You're left with $2,500 to $2,900 for life. This isn't tight. This is fantasy. One financial sneeze and the whole thing tips over. Now the movie starts. Months 1 to 3 calm. You get used to the payment. You tell friends, it's actually fine. Month 4, an email from the lender. Escrow adjustment. Taxes reassessed. Insurance went up. Your payment jumps $250 to $400. No choices. No maybe next month. What do you cut savings food retirement scene 2? Month 7 hours get cut. Not a full layoff, just temporary. 3 months. Income drops by $2,000 a month. You say we'll manage. Groceries go on the credit card. Savings gets postponed to next month. You tell yourself this is an exception. The mortgage doesn't know what an exception is. Scene 3. Month 10. The HVAC dies. Peak summer or winter depends on where you live. Quote, comes back at $7,000 to $12,000. The insurance deductible is $1,000. You don't have the cash because the down payment already left the building. So you do the only thing left that makes sense, you swipe the card. High interest, rising balance, and that's when the spiral begins. Not because you're irresponsible, but because too much of your money is locked inside an asset that doesn't hand you cash when you need it. At this point, I know what you're thinking. I'll side hustle, weekend Uber, night freelancing, selling stuff online. And I'm not anti-side hustle. But here's the truth. A side hustle doesn't replace a buffer. It just delays panic. It takes your time and energy at the exact moment you need them most. It helps you survive this month, so you can repeat the stress next month. Here's the line you need to hear because it perfectly describes what you're buying when everything is stretched this thin. You're not buying a home. You're buying a permanent anxiety subscription. Every month is a renewal. Every escrow email is a jolt. Every weird noise in the house becomes a math problem. And here's the darkest part. The system does not care whether you're okay. As long as the payment clears, everything is working as designed. The bank is fine. The market is fine. Sales reports look great. You're the only one learning how to breathe shallow. If this simulation made you uncomfortable, good. That means it's doing its job. Because in the next part, we're going to talk about the most important thing of all. You're allowed to not play this game. Not to give up on the dream, but to change the strategy so the dream doesn't turn into 30 years of stress. By this point, I want to be very clear about one thing before we wrap up, because this is where people tend to turn the blame inward. If you're sitting there right now, listening to all of this and feeling confused, discouraged, or even a little angry, you didn't fail. You didn't do anything wrong. The math failed you. A market that demands income levels and stress tolerance far beyond what's realistic is not a reflection of your worth. It's a system that's drifted away from real life. And I'm not here to tell you don't buy a house. I hate that kind of command. Instead, I want to leave you with something much more useful, a simple framework. 4 questions. No shame, no pressure, no need to prove anything to anyone. If you're considering buying a home, ask yourself honestly these 4 questions. First question, if one income disappears for 3 to 6 months, do we survive? Not thrive. Not live large. Just survive without panic. If the answer is probably not, then that house is relying way too much on luck. Second question, if a $10,000 surprise hits HVAC roof medical, can we handle it without going into debt? If every emergency has to go on a credit card, you're not buying a home. You're gambling. Third question, after all, housing costs are paid. Can we still save and invest consistently, not perfectly, not maxing everything out, just still moving forward? Because a house that forces you to sacrifice your future to survive the present isn't a stable foundation. And the fourth question, the one very few people are willing to ask, do we still have a life? Can you still rest? Still enjoy things? Still make choices that aren't completely suffocated by a monthly payment? If the answer is no, the price you're paying isn't just financial. And if after those 4 questions you decide not to buy, there is no shame in that. You have options. You can rent and invest the difference. You can buy smaller or cheaper. You can wait. You can move markets. You can house hack if it makes sense. This isn't giving up. It's choosing a different battlefield. Remember this line because it matters more than almost any advice you'll hear. There's no trophy for buying stress. There's no medal for living under pressure for 30 years just to say you own a home. And if this video helps you avoid a decision that would make your life harder to breathe, share it with someone who's house hunting right now. Not to scare them. Just to remind them of something we don't hear often enough: getting approved doesn't always mean it's worth doing.